up next, we've got our expert panel on cloud security trends and tips. And I'm going to go ahead and invite my fellow panelists here to go ahead and get onto video and enable their video as I go ahead and introduce everyone. Now, if you guys have been here for all of the prior sessions, you will have seen already the outstanding speakers that we have on this session. First, we've got Yawn, who's the co-founder and CEO of ByteChek. Earlier, he gave a talk on implementing a multi-account strategy in AWS. We've also got Kat Traxler here, who talked all about GCP platform as a service, demystifying those various services. And she's currently at Best Buy. And we've got Jamie Williams, who was in the keynote today, talking about SolarWinds and MITRE attack. And he's at MITRE, of course, as well. So welcome, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for hosting. This sounds like a great list and looking forward to it.
Yeah, very cool. I am so excited to talk to you guys. Hey, just a logistical item here before I dive into the questions that I've already got prepared. The Slack channel for this session here is going to be the number one Summit-discussion channel. And go ahead and feel free to type any of your questions as we go along in Slack or in the Zoom Q&A. I'll be monitoring those as we go along and trying to ask those to our panel here in real time. And so we've got a bit of time. You've all got a lot of experience. When we've got a large event like this, people come from varying degrees of experience and background, and they're at various points in their journey in terms of learning cloud security adoption at their organizations. So, I want to go ahead and, we'll start with Kat first in terms of kind of the first question with cloud security, as we've seen from all of the talks so far, is so big, right? Hey, where should people start and what experience does somebody need to actually get into cloud security? Kat?
Oh, thanks, Frank. That's a big question. Where's the start here button? I get that question a lot. I can never underemphasize, the importance of just getting your hands dirty and just figuring out how things work. Whether or not you consider yourself, an offensive person and you just want to break things, or a defensive person and you want to figure out how to defend attacks. It all starts with a foundational knowledge of how it's put together, how it's glued together, how does the technology work. So, if people feel comfortable, I would say, open yourself a cloud account and start doing some of the Hello World tutorials. Put on your engineering hat, your developer hat, your operations hat, and start with availability. In security, you always say confidentiality, integrity, and availability are the pillars. Start working on the availability thing. Try to keep a service up. Try to spin up your own cluster and keep it up and running, and before you try to tip them over.
That is great advice, and I love what you just said about keeping a service up and running. I've been in sessions and, in personal experience where, and even in work where we couldn't keep a service up and running, right? So that's how you learn with the trial by fire. But hey, Jamie, I saw you nodding your head a lot. You want to chime in?
I love that answer. And that was actually going to be spot on. Our approach to this is curiosity. Exactly as Kat said, ask questions. More than likely, you're probably already using something cloudy. So either if it's just a standalone application or you have a full environment, but, poke around, as she said, learn, kind of put your purple team hat on, from an adversary perspective, what could you do to this? From a defender perspective, what does that look like? Kind of build, even if it's just tabletopping and kind of digging into things, but also just, don't be afraid to kind of find what works for you. There's so much in this field, just security broad, but also just in cloud. Find, the most interesting part to you, whether it's, reporting on things, whether it's the defensive side, whether it's attacking it, and kind of maintaining that passion will really keep you going. Because sometimes, things aren't going to work, things might not make sense, but you kind of got to keep that perseverance and keep pushing, keep learning. So wherever, as long as you're kind of doing what you enjoy, you'll eventually end up in a really great place.
Mm-hmm. Great point about the curiosity. AJ, what about yourself?
Yeah, those are all really great points. You have to get your hands dirty. That's number one. So what Kat said is spot on. You the only way you can really learn in this field is by breaking things and being very confused. That's when I've learned the most is by going to sleep extremely frustrated. And then you wake up and it's eureka. I know exactly what happened. What I would say, just to add to this, is whatever cloud provider you're learning, whatever cloud technology you're learning, go out and learn the terminologies, learn the basics, understand what a virtual machine is called on AWS compared to Azure, or what is the actual account structure. You have projects, you have subscriptions, you have accounts, and a lot of these things, they all mean the same stuff across the cloud providers, but understanding the language, it's kind of like when someone leaves the military, they only speak in acronyms and no one knows what they're saying, and they have to relearn how to speak as a civilian. I say the same thing for the cloud. Learn the terminology, learn the language, and that's going to allow you to begin to move into and understand what does this even mean when we talk about cloud security, because you'll understand what all the words and terminology means.
Excellent. Yeah, AJ, let's stay with you. You just mentioned some cloud providers, and we would know that the big three are AWS, Azure, and GCP. And how would you guide people on where should they start? What should they learn first?
Yeah, I think there is, you're going to find value in all three. I think it comes down to preference and what you would prefer to use. But my number one piece of advice is to pick one. Don't try to learn all three cloud providers at once. It's difficult because they change so fast. They're innovating so quickly. And it's very hard to carve out expertise while trying to learn three different things at once. There's a Russian proverb that says, if you chase two rabbits, you catch none. If you chase three cloud providers, you will learn none. You will not learn any of those. So choose one. I've carved out my background in AWS mainly just because it was easy to use when I was first getting started. I'm not great with Microsoft anything. I'll struggle just literally opening a Word document on a Windows device. And GCP is really developer friendly, really engineer friendly. And I wouldn't call myself a super engineer by any stretch of the imagination. So I started on AWS, but there's enough opportunity in all of the different cloud providers that I think pick one, learn as much as you can, go heads down into that one. And a lot of the skills that you're going to learn in one are going to translate to the others anyways. But when you're first getting started, I recommend starting with one. I chose AWS mainly just because it was the easiest for me to use.
Yeah, great advice. Hey, before I go to Kat here, I just wanted to mention that some folks in Slack are mentioning, hey, run some Hello World tutorials. There's lots of code out there on GitHub and other places. And AWS even a lot of times makes it easy to get some code in GitHub and basically deploy via CloudFormation. And that's the best way, as you guys are saying, to learn. And, Kat, I know that multiple cloud providers. And, but, in your talk, you mentioned, hey, all that research that you shared, that was really in the last couple years. And how did you specifically make the decision to focus and be that GCP expert?
I was told to. I did not consciously make the decision. You go where the business needs you, right? And if there's a need, you follow. I started out in AWS like a lot of people do because it's easy and it's so ubiquitous. And there, compared to the other clouds, there's a really deep bench of research. A lot of it came out through Rhino Security a few years ago. So if you want to get your hands on of what bad looks like in a cloud, that documentation is out there. And then from there, that gave me a good foundation of what might be bad in GCP. And when I started diving into GCP and saying, well, I have to know this now, I was just mortified that there wasn't anything. I think sheer terror might have been the word, that there was no articles about security in GCP. And now slowly but surely we're building up a body of work so that when people are coming into the space, there's some place that they can start, which was not the case a couple of years ago. It was just vendor documentation, which, as we all know, is it's vendor documentation. It'll only get you so far.
Yeah, great point. Hey, Jamie, with you in terms of, hey, we know that MITRE attack, there's, it's evolved a lot over even just the relatively short amount of time. There's attack for enterprise, there's Mac and Windows and Linux, now with cloud and SaaS and ICS and mobile and so on. What about you in terms of your personal journey? How did you decide how did you figure out where you wanted to focus technologically?
Yeah, and it kind of aligns with exactly what's already been said is, instead of following our use case, following the threat. We very much depend on people publishing, threat intelligence, telling, what these adversaries are doing in these environments, and then be able to connect that with what Kat said with, the documentation and, connecting it with the ideas of how we're actually going to defend it. But in our case, we're kind of subject to the biases of threat intelligence sharing. Some people might get breached and might not talk about it, or some, in other instances, things are happening, things are, in a certain environment. I think we see a lot of, specifically, we see a lot of reporting coming out of more Azure environments. So we're able to, build out more techniques and more knowledge around those because we're actually seeing them in the public space. So, shameless plug here is, I think just a big thing for cloud in general is just, more, the need for more sharing, like not just like, those guides and all these resources, but also, from our perspective, just getting a glimpse on, now that these adversaries understand these environments, now they understand, the appetite to actually attack them, how are they doing that? Because one of the things we really often notice is the state of the possible, what an adversary could do in an environment is very different than what they actually end up doing. They have different priorities, they have different preferences, they might be, more risk adverse, where, some things might be a little bit loud. So really what we try to focus on doing is capturing, what does real in the wild operational actor activity in a cloud environment look like? So, we just kind of hop on the tail of, whatever people are willing to share and publish, we'll happily, document what we can in that space.
Yeah, very cool. Hey, just a friendly reminder to everybody, feel free to chime in here with any questions as we go along. And, Jamie, what you were just saying is kind of related to something that's come up in some other threads throughout the summit is, hey, where should I focus on in my career? If I'm kind of early in this, or even if I'm, along in the game for a while, maybe thinking about a pivot. You just mentioned kind of detection and monitoring and based on that adversary behavior, but there's lots of different areas of not just cloud, but security overall, architecture, defense, DevSecOps, pen testing, right? Pen testing tends to draw a lot of people, right? Their eyes kind of light up and say, oh, I want to get it. I don't think there's been anybody on my team over the years that has not said at one point they want to get into pen testing, right? But there's monitoring, there's compliance. What do you guys see, AJ, what do you see as the biggest needs for enterprises? Where should people be thinking about, hey, where's this greenfield opportunity for their careers? Oh, you're still on mute there.
There we go. I'll take it. I didn't know if it was Jamie or me, but I'll go first.
Did I say Jamie? Did I say the wrong name?
I think you said both of us. So
okay.
I'll go first, Jamie, and then I'll toss it to you after this. It's so hard because I talk to a lot of people that are trying to get in the field, and I do hear pen test a lot. That's the first thing you hear. I'm going to be a pen tester. And then they realize what it takes to be a pen tester. You're like, oh, maybe I don't want to be a pen tester. And they pull back a little bit. But I think what I tell people is you need to learn about what all these fields mean before you can really decide what you want to do, because there's significantly different experiences between being a compliance lead for somebody that's hosted in the cloud and running DevOps or DevSecOps. The challenges you're going to face are different. The people that you interact with are going to be different. Your day-to-day job is going to be different. So I think the key is find a way into the field doing something. A lot of times people for their first job, I want to be a pen tester, so the only jobs I'm going to take are pen testing. That's going to limit you. You should really get in and then start to interact with the compliance folks, start to interact with somebody running DevSecOps, start to interact with your architecture teams so that you know what do they do on a day-to-day basis, and then be able to decide. What I have found, to give some more specific advice, if you're looking to get into cloud security and you're looking to get in with the lowest learning curve from a technical perspective, compliance is a great place to start. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the compliance guy, but auditors don't have to be that technical. I wish they were more technical, and I'm trying to change things with that, but they don't have to be that technical. And then you get to go work with the developers, you get to go work with the architecture folks, the engineers, and you get to see a lot of this stuff and really be able to grow fast. What I would say from what's most important, what's the biggest need, and where I would try to focus is DevSecOps. I would figure out ways to shift security left in an organization, because you will be extremely valuable. If you're able to build security earlier on in the life cycle of whatever your organization is doing, there's a huge opportunity in DevSecOps right now, especially on the compliance perspective. But it really, get in, figure out, just find a way in, once you find your way in, then move around and figure out what do you actually enjoy, because there's aspects of cybersecurity. I love cybersecurity, but there's some stuff in cybersecurity I will not do. I'm not going to do certain jobs because I don't enjoy that. And you won't really know that until you see it and get involved.
100% agree there. And like I said, I think those terms aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, where exactly as AJ said, I personally bit the, I fell for the pen testing. I was like, I love that stuff, offensive framework, but then getting into stuff, you realize exactly as you said, during the course of your nature, you're gonna work with the blue team, you're gonna work with compliance folks, and you're gonna build that repertoire of knowledge and also resources and connections. Where exactly as AJ said, if that's not your jam, it's not for you, you can hop over and you kind of cross pollinate and bring a new perspective. And hey, some of the best red teamers and pen testers we've hired were former sysadmins, because they understood what the system should look like. They understood all the nuts and bolts, and they understood, what an admin's process kind of looks like in terms of, what they look for from dashboards, how they detect things. So they're super sneaky and know exactly how, a system, an environment should operate. So I think, anytime, and it's kind of almost exactly as I said before, just like following that passion, finding what you like, what you don't like, and be willing to, step outside of your comfort zone, learn a little bit, and apply that going forward. To the second part of your question, personally, I think all of them are all the kind of topics you mentioned are really important. I don't think any of them are, more pristine or kind of the upper echelon compared to any of the rest. But I'm personally a big fan of architecture. I think especially in cloud, it's such a dynamic and fluid environment. It's typical, obviously the principles of security tell us, detection and mitigation. Obviously in a perfect world, you mitigate things from happening, but your fallback is detecting it. I think that is a supremely more infinite and kind of exponential challenge with cloud, because things are fluid. You not only do you have to, understand your terrain and your battlefield and build the proper protections, but you also have to bake in those processes saying, when users stand up new services, when users, deploy new applications, whatever they're doing, that's going to come out of nowhere. We got to make sure that they understand how to do that and that we're monitoring that actually goes well. So I think, that in itself is we'll call that architecture, but that is, covers a bunch of the different topics that you already mentioned, compliance, testing, all those things are all involved in that same umbrella of, just doing things right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kat, you gave a huge two thumbs up when Jamie mentioned architecture. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to raise like an army of architects, right? I think like the world needs an army of architects. It's exactly what JB says, like there's the response and the detection piece in cloud that's obviously still very important, but it all starts with a solid architectural framework. And we have to do so much work on the front end to be able to move fast and break things in the back end, especially with the cloud, to be able to put in those like secure processes and those guardrails so that, our development and operations teams can just go as all architecture.
Nice.
Yeah, so it may not sound as sexy as pen testing, but I'm a reformed pen tester and have gravitated more and more to architecture, just because I can see like the impact it can have on a system.
Yeah, very cool. Hey, Kat, I'm going to stay with you. Ben asks a really good question here. And he says, hey, what is your most enlightening cloud mishap?
Lightning cloud mishap.
Yeah, and while you guys are all thinking about this here, I know I had a friend that I worked with. This was years ago, early in our careers, and all of our sensitive documents were stored on a shared Windows drive, and on a shared drive. And he accidentally thought it was the trash directory on his machine. Right-clicked and deleted it, and obviously he deleted the entire shared directory. And he came and told me, he's like, I'm not gonna tell anybody. It took the team like a week to recover from that, to get everything from backup. So yeah, you learn with these mistakes, right? As you guys were saying. But anything come to mind in terms of your most enlightening cloud mishap, or even technology mishap, maybe? We've all heard those stories about, admins with root access. They've got their two terminals up, and one terminal is dev, one terminal is prod, and they accidentally RMRF in prod, right? So yeah, there are those. While you guys are thinking about that, right, I'm going to go to another, hopefully easier to ask question. Seems like we've got a bunch of experts here where we don't make mistakes, right? But hey, so Laura asks, hey, who's been an influential person that you've worked with, how did they influence you to start doing something, stop doing something, change your mindset about something? Yeah, who comes to mind, folks, in terms of that influential person? I'll just leave it open for all of you.
Yeah, I'll go there. I'll talk about a cloud mishap first. Right when I first started, I think everybody that has got started in the cloud has run up their free tier, and it no longer was free. And I experienced that bill, and it hurt a lot. I wasn't making the most money at the time, so that bill was very painful. And I learned the power of cloud formation stacks and using those instead of manually deploying resources, because I could delete them all when I delete the stack. Which anyone that plays around with the cloud, I'm sure we all have that credit card scare that you got that bill, and it teaches you a lesson. It teaches you about billing alerts for sure. And then I would say from an influential person, it was someone that's a board of advisor at my company now. She ran governance, risk, and compliance at Duo Security, who was acquired by Cisco, and we worked together on a few projects. And the reason why she was inspirational and influenced me is because I saw that you can challenge the norm. It doesn't matter how big of an organization. She was at Duo, and then she went to Cisco, and she challenged the norm at all times. When the highest level of leadership comes in the room and says, we need to use this framework to do this massive cloud security assessment, and we want to do all of these things. And she raises her hand and, no, we're not going to do that because of X, Y, and Z. And understanding that a great security professional is one that does challenge the natural thought process that the business has, because it may not be the best decision from a security perspective. And you have to do that. You have to do that as a security professional. You can't be scared to say, that's not okay. That's not right. There's a better way to do this. And that has been something that I've been very grateful for, that experience, because it definitely gave me and empowered me to feel the same way. As it's not even about me personally, but as a security professional, you have a responsibility to challenge that norm, to tell people when security needs to be thought about. And it was pretty inspirational to see her do that. Someone that influenced me is for sure. Her name is Jamie Tomasello. She's head of GRC at Gusto now.
Awesome, right on. Hey, before I let you guys, Jamie or Kat, chime in here, I do hear a little bit of, I don't know, background noise. It's kind of like maybe a cell phone vibrating on the table, or like a fan, perhaps causing a table to vibrate. So hey, if you're not speaking, I'm gonna ask you guys to go on mute. So we'll just have to remember to mute and unmute here. And yeah, it looks like Jamie, you're unmuted. You want to go for it?
Yeah, I got a hardware mute too, so hopefully it wasn't me. But yeah, I think biggest security mishap. I can't go into too much specifics here, but it was involved. I think everyone kind of experienced something along this line, as not doing full checks before you take something from dev to prod. So even if you do a bunch of testing in dev and like you're sure it works, there's always those differences when things go operational. Whether we've seen some big cloud mishaps with people leaving creds or tokens and code deployed to a repository, but also like even little things where we tested a bunch of things, we think it works, it looks the way it should, and we put it in prod, and there's just like one variable or something we just didn't account for, tears everything apart, and it just kind of makes our lives a little bit of a nightmare for the time being. So that's kind of something always aware of, just keeping an eye on. Just kind of, like I said before, back to the architecture, just making sure you understand your systems, understand the surrounding variables, and that you're at least aware of what could go wrong, and you have something in place to kind of respond to that. In terms of influential people, I'm going to actually just point back to, the original MITRE attack leadership that I was, kind of, they've coached me up. I'm talking, Adam Pennington, Katie Nichols, and Blake Strum. Particularly, Adam and Katie have done, amazing jobs, and I don't think I've given them enough credit for everything they've done for me. Particularly, biggest lesson I've learned is when someone you respect and trust tells you to do something, you should probably do it. It might sound like a burden or a chore, but they're really trying to push you in the right direction. But also, kind of more broad advice was, I come from a very offensive background. Like to dive into things very technically, talk about things at a very technical level, but that's not really what solves the problems. You need to be able to like scope things back, make them approachable, make them more generally consumable. So just kind of making sure that, you understand, if you make something awesome and only like 1% of the community can actually make use of it, you really didn't do anything. Rather than, taking a couple steps back, making sure that people can actually understand it, making it more broadly, kind of digestible, and actually, and also just understanding the needs of others, whether it's, those decision makers are really the ones that are going to be the ones that, fund something or don't fund something. So the better that you can make your ideas and your concepts and everything you're working on resonate with them, you actually get a little bit more traction on adoption. And actually, be able to make, impactful differences versus, this little small, niche part of the community that thinks it's awesome and thinks it's really powerful, but, no one's really hearing about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. That's related to a comment that came in a little while ago in Zoom about how, hey, we know it's the business that's driving it, right? And, security is not necessarily the primary focus of the business overall, right? So yeah, absolutely. Kat, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to give a shout out to all my Best Buy colleagues, especially those in operations. I work, hand in hand with the operations team at Best Buy, and they are up there in the level of maturity in managing and organizing systems. And I think that security can only be as mature as their IT and their technical partners. And they have set a maturity bar that has allowed us to grow and mature as a security organization. I think that, sometimes there's a tendency in a security organization to just be the no people. No, you can't do DevOps. No, you can't go to the cloud. No, you can't be agile. And we all know how well that will work, right? But if you have good partners on the business side and on the operations side that are, like I said, just having very efficient and mature processes, that makes our job in security so much easier to be able to hook on to those mature, efficient processes. So just shout out to Best Buy operations.
Yeah, hey, that's great. Hey, in that same vein, Kat, staying with you for a moment here, hey, with your deep technical background, all of the research that you do, I know you've been taking on more leadership responsibilities, building the cloud security team and program at work. And can you talk a little bit about what are some of the tips, right? Kind of what have you encountered? What are some tips on building that team, identifying needed skills, and transitioning to take on those additional leadership responsibilities?
Yeah, so I started transitioning to more of a leadership role a few months ago. Once it became just eminently clear that I don't scale, no matter how much I worked, there was no scaling me. And I come from a non-traditional background, so I feel like I'm really well poised to be able to teach people cloud, teach people security. If there's any piece of advice that I can give people in hiring positions, look creatively at resumes for people who, you're not looking for all of the certs. You're not looking for that 5 years at a pen test company. Look creatively at their background. Did they work in help desk? Do they work in IT? Do they work in Geek Squad? These things that they're going to actually have a lot of really good problem solving skills, a lot of technical skills. Maybe they've showed, capacity to learn. They just haven't had the right exposure yet. Cloud security, I mean, we need so many more people in this industry. And there's also a ton of people clamoring in or who want to get in. So we need to be able to look at these resumes and see the potential in people and invest in them. Is kind of where I'm at. Because if you just, well, I'm just going to wait for the 10-year expert resume to show up. That's not going to happen.
Hey, we all started nodding our heads and all virtually nodding our heads when you said I don't scale and the need to invest in other people. And along that same lines, AJ, hey, as a startup founder, hey, you're busy in terms of growing the business, trying to scale it, but I know you spend still a lot of time, right, investing in the community, trying to engage with others and help others. How do you think about this in terms of kind of prioritizing your work and related to kind of approach to what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, great question and really great tips from Kat there. I think for me in the role as a co-founder and CEO, which is still very weird to say, I got into this position because I wanted to impact others. I wanted to have a bigger impact. As Kat was saying, I don't scale. I realized that my mentorship didn't scale. I couldn't help people at scale when I was not in this position. So a part of building my business, a part of the reason why I started this company was to be in a position to give back, to be able to have an impact on folks at a larger scale, but also I can hire who I want. I'm running, it's my company. So I can give people an opportunity to get that experience that they want. And I'm a strong believer in working with going with people instead of resumes. I can care less about your resume. I care more about who you are and what you're trying to do and your work ethic. And being in this position allowed me to do that. When it comes to prioritizing work and finding out, where should you focus? When building a business, there's really two buckets that you should always focus on. Your people, the people that are working for you, the people that are working with you, the people that are sacrificing, especially at a startup. Everyone at a startup is sacrificing time, money, something. And then your customers. A lot of times, especially startup founders, they think about everything else. They think about investors, they think about press, they think about all these other things. At its core, your people and your customers are all that really matters. And in that order, your people first. So a lot of times the customers get put in front of the people, but that's not the case either. So whenever I'm doing something, I look at through the lens of that. And then I also understand that I have a requirement as a CEO. I often say my CEO title is Chief Evangelist Officer. I have a requirement to speak and speak a lot, and speak a lot about what we're doing and about these concepts, which I feel is pretty important. And the other thing I tell my team to do, and I encourage anybody I mentor, is to build your personal brand, because your personal brand makes you Teflon to any changes in the industry, to a global pandemic, or a downturn at your company, because people will know you. They'll really know you. A lot of times in networking, we hear it's about who you know. It's not, to me. It's about who knows you and what do they know that you do. And oftentimes you can prove that at scale by just posting on social media or just participating in events like this and building relationships with people in Slack. So personal branding is so important, whether as a business owner or just, working and trying to grow yourself in this career. So I just try to lead by example, really try to lead by example in that case. And it's really important, especially for me as a Black man in cybersecurity, to be public and represent and show some representation for those young kids that are trying to get in the field, because I grew up and it was sports. That was the only way I could get out of the situation that I was in. It wasn't about cybersecurity or technology. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't see anyone that looked like me doing well. So I think I have that responsibility on my shoulders to show up and make sure that there's people out there that know, hey, there's somebody that looks like me that's doing this. And in order to fill that skills gap, quote unquote, that exists out there, we got to hire more women. We got to hire more minorities into this field to grow this thing.
Hey, great tips that aren't just applicable to a startup, to a company, but for most of us, I think here in the virtual room, we're maybe working at different companies and enterprises, building as part of the security team. And so these are tips in terms of focusing on people and customers, understanding the business, that apply to, I think, all of our situations, right? So that's a great tip there. And, in terms of, Jamie, in terms of engaging with the community that AJ was just talking about, I know MITRE does a lot of that. Attack is always out there, and, we're all here today. And in terms of, can you share with us a little bit about the process that you guys have for developing and updating Attack, and how, you mentioned it's kind of attack driven, right? What are attackers actually doing? But how do you decide where to engage the community, and how do you decide to focus on certain areas and solicit that community feedback?
Yep, absolutely. And just one quick thing I wanted to add. I love the previous comments from both Kat and AJ, but you also just don't forget about yourself. Like not selfishly, but invest in yourself. Unplug, take some time, make sure you're kind of maintaining that work-life balance, but also resources. If you want to learn things, take the time to dedicate yourself and kind of dive deep into those things that you're interested in, just to lining up with a personal brand. But don't forget about the human behind the keyboard who's doing all this awesome work. But yeah, back to Attack. Like I said before, we follow the threat. As we see emerging areas kind of mature, especially with the surrounding knowledge base of not just what could happen, but what is happening. That's recently, great way that materialized recently was with the introduction of the containers matrix. So we saw, there is a wealth of reporting around, Docker and Kubernetes based breaches. There's enough where we can not just talk about, one little thing that's happening in those environments, but actually a more complete kind of kill chain, looking across an entire campaign. There's multiple behaviors that are there. So we're very much open to, as you said, engaging with the community. Obviously, we rely on the community for that reporting, but also reaching out to experts and saying, hey, this is kind of, how we see this space. This is how kind of we have modeled it. How do you guys see it? I think if you check out our blog post, you can kind of trace that entire pipeline through the creation of the containers matrix. You can kind of see, experts in the field, Microsoft and various others were documenting, building their own attack-like matrix for, what these threats to Kubernetes and Docker look like. We're able to kind of collaborate with them, run that through more lenses, more perspectives, get all this, great feedback on not just what's happening, but how as defenders we see those problems, how we prioritize them, how we actually defend them. So, biggest thing is, if you're interested, definitely check out all of our resources online. It's a community. It's not just, MITRE, spilling things or pushing anything. It's something we want people to, not only be able to use, contribute back to, but then take into their own environments and make it their own. There's different things, different lenses that you may look at, the kind of the threats here. So just making sure we're enabling all those opportunities while still becoming, understanding that we all have a central kind of shared problem that we can just, kind of work together to hopefully, we're not going to solve anything, but make better over time. I think you're muted. Imagine what you said was awesome, though.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Yeah. Hey, so, hey, people are chiming in here in Slack, kind of agreeing with a lot of what is being said, sharing some of their personal experiences as well. Just a friendly reminder for all of you guys here in chat, feel free to go ahead and put your questions in. We've only got a little bit less than 10 minutes to go. So if you got some burning questions that you want to ask our panelists here, feel free to chime in. And, sticking on kind of that technical theme, earlier we were talking about building, growing those architects, right? And, learning different areas of cloud security is, hey, as an architect, well, hey, as a senior leader, people come to you to ask all of their cloud, get all of their cloud questions answered. Alejandro asks, and Kat, we'll start with, you. Hey, what about when people in your company expect you to have all of the cloud security answers? As we said, we can't know it all necessarily. So how do you go about responding, Kat?
You take a couple of deep breaths and you say, I don't know. And that's totally fine. I get this a lot, with all of the different clouds out there. There's not just 3 clouds, there's a lot of clouds. And I'm convinced that people can really only be an expert at one and really kind of like dabble in the others. I don't think it's reasonable for somebody to expect you to be an expert in all clouds. Just get that out of the way. It is reasonable for somebody to come to you and say, can you help me with my problem? Can you help me figure out what the best secure solution is for it? And that's when you you take a deep breath and you say, okay, let me book some time to review this. And I'm gonna have to ask you some questions. But yeah, there shouldn't be an expectation that you know all of the things about all of the clouds. I don't know, I need a minute is a perfectly great answer.
Yeah, great response. Hey, we have another question here in Slack, and hey, AJ mentioned this. We all come from different backgrounds, and hey, there, truth be told, there might be some biases, right, in different situations that we might face. And specifically, we've got a question about, hey, what about somebody who's maybe a little older, 50 plus, that's wanting to get into cybersecurity? How would you guys respond? What tips would you have in that case?
Yeah, my tips would be the same, honestly, regardless of your age. It's you need to pick up some skills, whatever those skills may be, and that's whether that's through a cert, whether that's through some boot camps, whether that's through a CTF, whether that's just you literally on YouTube, where I learn a lot of things. Learn some skills and share them. Learn in public, learn out loud is what I tell people all the time. Don't just pop up 6 weeks later with a certification. Tell people about the journey, describe your process, because oftentimes you're going to pop up on somebody's radar that would not have seen you if you weren't talking about that anyway. So regardless of your age, regardless of your experience or how long you've been in the field, the best thing that you can do when you're trying to break into cybersecurity is don't be silent about trying to break into cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, as scary it may seem from the outside, if you look at some of the folks here on the chat between Kat, Jamie, and myself, we're just regular folks. We're just regular people that kind of like technology a little bit, and we know how to Google very well because that's what, at least that's what I do all day, is I'm just on Google. So it's not this masterful thing that you have to think that we're these people that are on a pedestal. Like cybersecurity is probably one of the most helpful communities I've ever been a part of. And you will find that the more that you share about your journey, the more that you're sharing about your learnings, the more people that are going to be willing to reach out and help you. Now, if you just pop up with a bunch of search and are like, hey, I want a job, that's not going to work. You need to get embedded in the community, because in cyber, if you think about this space, the most important thing we care about is trust. Is we're trying to have systems, trust systems or users or whatever it may be. We're thinking about trust. So from a human perspective and networking perspective, build that trust, show who you are, and that's going to allow you to grow in this field, regardless of your age, experience, et cetera.
Awesome. Hey, before I go to Jamie here, hey, AJ, you just mentioned, it's getting a bunch of certs is not going to necessarily help you in terms of getting that first job. Roman actually asked right before that something about exactly that. He said, AJ, hey, you got 6 AWS certifications. Did that help you in cyber, or was that more of a personal goal? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't think it helped me. I was already in cybersecurity when I started collecting AWS certs. For me, certifications give me a organized structure to learn. That's all it does. It tells me, like, learn these topics and then go test out that you know them. And that's why I kept getting certifications, because I'm like, oh, I want to learn more about doing developer activities on AWS. Oh, there's a developer associate cert. Oh, I want to learn more about being a sysadmin. Oh, there's a SysOps associate cert. So I would use certifications to just grow my knowledge and force myself to learn services that I probably didn't interact with in my day-to-day job. I'll give an example. When I went for security specialty, I learned so much about Amazon Athena, and I hadn't used it that much beforehand. And now I love Amazon Athena, and I never would have known about it if I didn't use it while learning about security specialty. So for me, the certifications gave me experience to and a path to learn a new skill. And then it allowed me to, people respect certs. So they see that I have a bunch of certs, like, oh, he must know something. And I don't know if that's true or not, but at least it gets me in the room and gets me the conversation going. And I can then prove if I know it. So I like how certifications are a great way for you to, at the end of the day, it's you and that computer, you're staring at it, you got questions in front of you, and you have to either know it or you don't. And that's a great way to just, test out where you're at. The cool thing about certs is you can fail and no one will know. I failed a lot of certs. Most of the people that that have certs, they failed. So go test yourself. You fail, you can tell people, you cannot, try again and keep going.
Right on.
I will tell you, I have maximized my over-under in all of my SANS certs, like right under the wire.
Too funny. Hey, in the few minutes that we have left here, I've got one question for Jamie, and then I'm going to give each of you guys a last word to go around here. So, hey, Jamie, we've got one question from Stephen here, and he says, hey, hackers are very innovative. And do you feel that maybe security is not as innovative as it could be in terms of we might have this feeling that security is always kind of running to catch up and keep up?
Absolutely. I think, like I said, I think there's been multiple publications that highlight exactly that. Like the innovation curve of an adversary is much steeper than that from defense, because, the defense is, you already have a lot of complexity on your side. There's all these, there's so much to worry about. Whereas, attackers can actually, just kind of, clear slate, sit down and say, how am I going to break that thing? And they can just, dive deeply into one particular topic. But where we can kind of combat that as defenders and kind of, not necessarily, we can't go and, sling all these creative and defensive, crazy ideas into our environment, because things could become unstable. It could be, way more complex than something that we can manage. But where we can actually combat that is by just, staying true to our principles, saying, there's certain, key, like if we, kind of at a high level picture, if we have, lockdown, authentication and these big, umbrella topics, maybe a lot of this creative ideas that come from adversaries will kind of fall under those umbrellas. We can kind of, cast a wide net and catch a bunch of, perspective, new twists and ideas. But also big thing there is, you can't forget about your adversary. you constantly have to, even if you're doing what you're doing and you're maxed out, just keep an eye on, what's going on. You can kind of almost start to see trends where, from the attack perspective, we see things, con talks, research papers, all that's great. And then we kind of keep an eye on those and say, hey, that looks operational. That looks like something an adversary would actually use. And before we even see it, let's just take a look and see, making sure our umbrellas are actually, cast wide enough where it actually would catch it. So it's not necessarily, I don't think it's an R&D, we're not investing enough in R&D on the defensive side versus just philosophically just understanding, this is the way the world's going to work. But we just need to, kind of make sure we understand where we are, and just, as things come to us, that we have the right, response and approach.
All right. Hey, everybody, the time just flew by. So, hey, for each of you guys, we'll go with Kat, AJ, and then finish off with Jamie here. What's the 30 seconds? What's the last word that you would like to leave the listeners with here? Kat?
Enjoy your weekend. Turn off the computer, put down your phone, get outside, enjoy the weather.
Awesome. AJ? Oh, unmute. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. Again, sorry. If you're trying to get into cybersecurity, trying to break into cloud security, if you're trying to do anything difficult, ignore the results for the first 3 months. Don't worry about the results. Don't worry about, did you make it this far? Focus on just showing up every single day to do something. If that's taking a break, that's taking a break, but just ignore the results. A lot of times we quit too often. We overestimate what we can do in a short period of time and underestimate what we can do in a longer period of time. So stay focused, stay consistent. This stuff is hard, but it's fun, and enjoy it.
Right on. Jamie?
I think it's hard to top or even compare to what the last two said. That's amazing. But I would say don't be a jerk, ask questions, and, when people actually give you good advice or when they're sharing their knowledge, listen. Don't just just kind of one in one ear out the other. Listen to what they're saying, why they're saying it, and really take the time to kind of understand, the gratification and kind of the bigger picture of the meaning of, all of this information that they're taking the time to share with you.
Awesome. Well, hey, appreciate you guys. Thanks for being here. Let's give them a virtual round of applause, everybody. And yes, appreciate you guys. And we are going to take a short break for a few minutes, and we'll have the next session at the top of the hour. Thanks, everyone.